All right, that's for you. Yeah. All right. Well, welcome back. Today is January 12th, a red letter day in history. Three things. I only have three things today that talked about. First of all, it was on this date in 1525. Okay, this is going to be a long day if I can't do it. In 1525 in Zurich, the at Zwingli's suggestion, Ulrich Zwingli was the other reformer. When we talk about the Reformation, we often talk about Martin Luther because he kind of started the whole thing. But Zwingli was the other reformer. They kind of went around the same time. And our way of doing church and beliefs and doctrine probably has more to do with Zwingli than it does with Luther. That is the Baptist Protestant thing. But Zwingli was also in his spare time a city council member, so he was a politician and general. In fact, he died in battle. But at Zwingli's suggestion, the Zurich City Council passed an ordinance that confiscated the land and property of the monasteries, that is, the Catholics, and to create a fund to assist the poor and the schools. Okay, so so having said that, it's about a dozen years later that Henry VIII is going to do the same thing in England after the English, the so-called English Reformation, that he is going to confiscate all of the property of the assets, and and of course he didn't create a fund; he created a fund to make himself rich. But I say that just to point out that this is two examples in history where the Protestants in power have seized churches for their own gain. So if people say, "Oh, that would never happen today," well, has happened before. So I'm just throwing that out there. Speaking of things that have happened before, it was on this date in 1803 that the U.S. approved the Louisiana Purchase. This is where the government plopped down a huge amount of money and bought a huge amount of land. In case, I don't know, some incoming president has some plans of plopping down a huge amount of money and buying a huge amount of land, because why not buy an ice-covered land? We've got Illinois. Why do we need another? I'm kidding. And finally, it was on this date in 1871 that Anglican priest and hymn writer Henry Alford died. I know, Henry Alford. This is where you all go, oh, poor Henry. His best known hymn was the hymn, "Come ye thankful people, come, raise the joy of harvest home, all is safely gathered in." So yeah, that's all I got for today. I was just looking, man, there's nothing really. Yeah, I know. I was surprised, but other stuff has been happening this past week that we'll talk about as we get into 1 Samuel 19 and 20, but as a matter of fact. Okay, we are talking about the book of Samuel, and today we're going to continue discussing more about Saul's family. I thought about it last time, and I should have titled last week's lesson, "Everyone Loves David," because that was kind of the theme, as you remember, that Jonathan loved David and Michael loved David. And this time we're going to, and I could label this one, "Everyone Lies for David," because that's kind of what happens in chapters 19 and 20. But actually, I'm going to talk about Jonathan for the defense. Jonathan, and I misspelled Jonathan there. There should be an A. Boy, I tell you what, this is, it was the snow. That's what, yeah, let's call it, it was the snow doing this. Yeah. Jonathan for the defense. So in chapter 18, everyone loves David. And in chapters 19 and 21, they're going to lie for him. So I don't know, maybe if you're running a marriage class, maybe you can say, here's, the next, how do we know Michael loved David? Well, she lies for him. Is that, I'm not saying you need to lie for your husband. Don't. No, please don't say I said that. Everyone, here in chapter 1, or let me, Saul tried at least 3 times to kill David in chapter 18, despite the fact that Jonathan loves him and Michael loves him and his assistants love him and his generals love him. Saul tries to kill him at least 3 times. Twice he throws a spear at him. You remember David's playing the lyre and he chucks a spear at him and David avoids it, and then it says he did it a second time. So it's like David got back up and, you know, Saul got another spear or went and got his spear and sat back down. I don't know. And then he sends him off into somewhat impossible battle situations in the hope that he was going to die, which obviously did not happen. So he tries, depending on how time he did it, that's why I say he tried at least 3 times to kill David. And in chapter 19, beginning with verse 1, Saul is going to make obvious what everyone else probably already knew. Okay, so 19 verse 1, Saul told his son Jonathan and all the attendants to kill David. Okay, so Saul is like, all right, I'm just going to quit with the, I just need to, obviously I can't hit him with a spear in a small room. Somebody else needs to do the job. So he makes obvious what everyone else already knows. Jonathan warns him though, but Jonathan had taken a great liking to David. In chapter 18, it said he loved him as himself and warned him. My father Saul is looking for a chance to kill you. Be on your guard tomorrow morning. Go into hiding and stay there. I will go out and stand with my father in the field where you are. I'll speak to him about you and will tell you what I find out. Okay, so David is warned by Jonathan, who volunteers to talk to Saul. So Jonathan, and we'll find this out throughout this particular chapter, Jonathan believes that he is Saul's ace confidant, that Saul's right-hand man. And why not? He's the heir apparent, right? He's the Prince of Wales. He's the next king. According to normal rules and regulations, he would be the next king of Israel. Okay, so why not fill him in on what's going on? And I think he does to a certain extent. And so Jonathan says, all right, I'll tell you what, I'm going to have this conversation with him, but I'm going to bring him out here into this field, and you're going to be hiding behind this tree, and you can listen to the conversation so that you know that I'm not making it up. Okay, so he does. Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul his father and said to him, let not the king do wrong to his servant David. He has not wronged you, and what he has done has benefited you greatly. He took his life in his hands when he killed the Philistine. The Lord won a great victory for all Israel, and you saw it and were glad. Why then would you do wrong to an innocent man like David by killing him for no reason? So Jonathan reminds Saul of a couple of things about David. Number one, David has has not wronged him. He hasn't done anything to you. He's not leading a rebellion. Okay, so he says he hasn't wronged you at all. He's benefited you. Okay, it was, you got to admit, Saul, it was a good thing when he killed Goliath, right? That was a good thing, and it made you glad. So it's like, why would you kill him? Why would you do this terrible thing? Okay, and so Saul takes, and I put in parentheses here, another oath. Okay, and the oath he takes promises not to kill David. Here he says, Saul listened to Jonathan and took this oath. As surely as the Lord lives, David will not be put to death. Okay, now I say another oath because if you remember, this is not the first time we see Saul taking an oath. You remember in chapter 14, he took an oath that nobody's going to eat until until the battle is over, and Jonathan eats, not knowing about the oath, and leads it, and there would have been a great victory that day had the men eaten. And even Jonathan says, if you remember in chapter 14 when we were talking about it, he says, the Lord, my father has brought great trouble on the nation this day. That could have been a day for a great victory, but it wasn't because of Saul, because of Saul's oaths. So this suggests that Saul might be a little quick on the oath taking. Oh yeah, like I guess an oath is like their version of today's promise. Okay, and you know anybody who's quick on the on promises? Oh, I promise. I promise, absolutely. I promise, you can trust me. I'm going to do this. And then they get into office and they say, well, things were different than what I thought when I was running, kind of thing. But uh, so Saul takes another oath, promising not to kill David. And David overhears this, right? He's hiding behind a tree while they're having this particular conversation. One of the staples of Shakespeare plays, if you've ever seen a Shakespeare play, is that there's probably, I don't know, maybe a third or a half of them have some scene where a conversation is overheard. Sometimes it's intentional, meaning the people are staging the conversation, and they always stage it in a very funny manner that they move around and make the person hiding go from piece to piece to piece, So overhearing the conversation, okay? And so David overhears the conversation. So Jonathan, verse 7, Jonathan called David and told him the whole conversation, reviewed it with him. He brought him to Saul, and David was with Saul as before. End of story, end of book. That's it. We can go. Have a night. No, I'm just. As a result, David was with Saul as before, which means he's playing the lyre when Saul's feeling down. He's captain. He's permanently in Saul's house, doing great benefits, serving the king of Israel, all the while knowing that he has been anointed the next king. Okay, he has been anointed the next king. As a result, David was with Saul as before. Okay, all right, everything's good. Sometime later, okay, there's no date, STL, sometime later. We don't know how long. Once more, war broke out, and David went and fought the Philistines. He struck them with such force that they fled before him. Once again, David is outrageously successful with the Philistines. And again, what was Saul hired to do, so to speak? He was hired to defeat the Philistines. And he failed. Okay, he's not able to accomplish that. But David is able to go out there and with ease beat the Philistines. Okay, and then of course when they brought him in, Saul has killed his thousands, David has killed his tens of thousands. They're hearing about these amazing victories of David, and Saul is not able to process this. And it says, verse 9, but an evil spirit from the Lord came on Saul as he was sitting in the house with his spear in his hand. Okay, and again, when it talks about an evil spirit, it could mean the source. Okay, it could mean the source. Marty, did you get one of? It could mean the source. It could also be a descriptive, like the effect it has on the person. Okay, so it's a harmful spirit. That and again, it could be. It could be a demonic spirit. It could be some sort of mental illness, bipolar disorder. It could be anything like that. But once again, Saul is an evil spirit. He's sitting there. He's holding the spear now. Now, I don't know how, they make that, the author makes that point, which makes me think that the first couple of times the spear was in the room. Now, this time, Saul is holding the spear with his spear in his hand. While David was playing the lyre, Saul tried to pin him to the wall with his spear, but David eluded him as Saul drove the spear into the wall. Okay, so again, the implication here is that the first two times Saul just kind of throws the spear at him and misses. This time Saul has the spear in his hand and he's trying to, kind of he can't really, maybe when he threw it, oh sorry, I slipped. I was practicing and it just kind of, I don't know. But this time he's like, come here, I'm yeah, it's like it's hard to say, okay, and this time David doesn't go back. Okay, this time David doesn't say, listen, he's come to the conclusion that, you know what, it might not be safe there. Okay, so I'm going to go back. In fact, I'm going to go home, and that's in fact what he does. So let's see. Saul tried to pin him to the wall with his spear, but David eluded him. As Saul drove the spear into the wall, that night David made good his escape. So he goes home. Okay, we find out in the next verse. He goes home to Michal, his wife. Michal again is Saul's daughter. And what do we know about Michal and David and how she felt about David? Does anybody remember? Michal loves David. We find that twice. And again, that is the only time in the Bible we hear about a woman loving a man. Okay, that what she loved David. So she goes home to he goes home to Michal. Now there's no we don't have any direct conversation recorded here between David and Michal. Okay, we don't hear anything that David said to him. Okay, so it's a question, is she in fact lying? Well, that's not the right question. Let's see. Saul sent men to David's house to watch it and kill him in the morning. But Michal, David's wife, warned him, if you don't run for your life tonight, tomorrow you'll be killed. Now, Michal perhaps is aware of the plan. Maybe Jonathan has told her. Maybe Saul has told her. Maybe she just, you've all seen the movie where, the spy movie or something, or the cop movie where two guys are in the car and the one guy says, we're being followed. No, we're not. And the other one says, yes, it is. Black car in the back, with the missing license plate or something like that. You've all seen that. Maybe she's able to look out, how they go to the window and they look out and they do this thing. You see the guy standing at the street corner like that, maybe she's able to recognize the signs and go, listen, those are Saul's guys and they're here to kill you in the morning. And you need to leave town. Okay. And so where is it here? Saul sent his men to watch it. Michal, David's wife, warned him, if you don't run for your life tonight, you'll be killed. So Michal let David down through a window and he fled and escaped. Okay. So David runs home where Michal warns him to flee. Michal aids his escape. And it's just sort of interesting that she lets him down from a window, kind of let him down from a window. I don't know. I just kind of picture Debbie letting me down from a window. This is why I'm thankful that our bedroom is on the first floor, because I'm like, I don't know if I was on the second floor. When you go into, because I'm at Bolingbrook High School and you have to go through these training exercises and things about what do you do in case of a fire and other exciting things that happen in schools. And one of the things is you go out the window, and they talk about it. It's like, well, if you're at the second floor window, and I look around at the kids and I go, are you going to let me? No, none of them are going to let me down, kind of thing. But this is, of course, they kind of expect that the teachers are going to be going down with the ship sort of thing. To which I point out, I'm just a sub, so I'm out the window before any of them. I don't know. Let's pray that never happens. But so she lets him out the window somehow. She lets him down. Okay, and of course this is perhaps someday I'll do a series on ways to escape, and I would throw down this one because in Joshua 2:15, if you remember the spies going to Jericho, and they go to Rahab's house, and how do they escape from Rahab's house? They're let down through a window, and then in Acts chapter 9, Paul goes to Damascus. He's converted on the way. He gets people mad almost immediately. And how does he escape from Damascus? Well, they let him down from a window. So apparently this was it was a common thing to see people hanging out of windows in ancient Israel, kind of thing. I don't know. That was kind of the way to go. You'd think that by at some point they'd say, watch the windows, like the Costco, get the back door kind of thing. Watch the windows. Somebody's going to be climbing out of the window. So David escapes out of the window, and his wife is helping him. Okay, his wife has warned him. Michal has warned him. Michal, in essence, has saved his life. Remember, David had a spear thrown at him in the previous chapter, and then goes back in and continues playing the lyre. So maybe David comes home and says, okay, Saul had a bad day today, but he'll be okay tomorrow. I'll go back in tomorrow. And so he says, maybe that's a plan. And Mike's like, listen, you don't know my family. Okay, I know my family. You don't know my family. He's not going to be better tomorrow. You need to get out of here. So she saves his life, right? She warns him. She saves his life. David down through the window and he fled and escaped. Then Michael, verse 13, took an idol and laid it on the bed, covering it with a garment and putting some goat's hair at the head. Okay, so the basic gist of the story we understand. We've seen this in the movies. You puff up the pillows and all of that, and kind of. The question is, why does Michael have an idol? Okay, which leads to the question, why does David allow an idol in there? Okay, the Hebrew word here is teraphim, and it's the same word used in Genesis, where Rachel and Jacob and Rachel, Rachel, Leah, Jacob, Rachel, steals her father's idols, and Laban gets mad about it and goes, and where is it? And she's sitting on them, and she's, I don't know where they are, and he doesn't make her get up to see that she's sitting on the idols. But this idol that she has is big enough to be, it's like human size, whatever it is. It's big enough to put in a bed and cover up and think, oh, there's a body, somebody lying in the bed. Why does Michael have an idol to begin with? Well, let's see. Remember why Saul was eager to marry off Michael? What did Saul say about Michael? That she would be a what? Does anybody remember? Pardon me? She would be a snare to him. Okay. Is this what he's talking about? I don't know. Perhaps. She's got an idol. She's got a big idol, and it's in the house. I don't know that she's hiding it. I mean, who knows? There could be a closet or something. But she's got this idol. She puts it in the bed. And it's interesting because, when he talks about in 1 Samuel 15, I think, is it 15? Do I have the verse there? Where am I here? 15:35. Oh no, I'm sorry. 15:23. When Samuel confronts Saul for doing he says, to obey is better than sacrifice, kind of thing. He says it's the sin of witchcraft, and that is kind of referring back to this worship of these teraphim. Kind of thing. It's like, whoa, wait a minute, what's going on here? So kind of like, wow, Michael might not be as, again, she's in love with David. There's no question about it. She's willing to do all of this, but it does not appear that David's household at this point is unified in worshiping the Lord according to the 10 Commandments, as in no graven images. Okay. So covering it. So when Saul sent the men to capture Michael said he's ill. Okay. Now, this is what Michael says. Now, we could argue that she's lying. She's just covering for David, and she is. Okay, because he's not ill, so she is willing to lie. Now, is this her plan or is this David's plan? We don't know. Okay. Now, later on in the chapter, David is going to have a situation. He's going to have a very complex plan on how, so it's not like David doesn't plan this stuff out. Did David say, listen, you let me down the window and you do this? That is a possibility that it happened. The way the author wants you to think this is Michael doing this, and it could be. Okay, but just keep that in mind. Michael says he's ill. He's sick. So when Saul sent the men to capture David, Michael said he's ill. Then Saul sent the men back to see David and told them, bring him up to me in his bed so that I may kill him. I guess Saul figures that if he is truly sick, he can't dodge the spear. Okay, it's easier, I'll kill him that way. But when the men entered, there was the idol in the bed, and in the head was some goat's hair. Okay, so clearly at some point, Saul realizes Michael's in on this, because he brings Michael in and says, Saul said to Michael, Why did you deceive me like this and send my enemy away so that he escaped? Now, note, Saul is pretty clear on who David is to him. Okay, your husband, my enemy. Okay, I don't know, maybe some of you have that relationship with your father-in-law, but you say, my enemy, why did you send him away? And here she lies to him. Michael told him, Saul, he said to me, let me get away. Why should I kill you? Which essentially is, let me go or I will kill you. That I will kill you before I let Saul kill me. Okay. Now, again, we already know that David is a fairly brutal guy. Okay. This is a guy that went out and killed 200 Philistines and got 200 foreskins and went out. So is David beyond this? Could he have said this? I don't think so. But, she's just recounting it. I think she's just lying for David again because she loves him. Okay. Michael told him, he said to me, let me get away. Why should I kill you? Okay. Now, Michael's not completely out of the picture at that point. This is the last we hear of her for a while. When David had fled away, verse 18, when David had fled and made his escape, he went to Samuel at Ramah. So Samuel is still with us. Okay. So he's probably pretty old. And told him all that Saul had done to him. Then he and Samuel went to Naioth and stayed there. Now, Naioth is in Ramah. Naioth means building. Okay, or settlement kind of thing. So it could be that this is a building, a location within the city of Ramoth where he goes, or where maybe like his house or something like that. Okay, so he goes there. Word came to Saul, David is in Naioth at Ramah. Okay, so let me see here. So David runs to Samuel. Saul finds out and sends 3 times to take him. So let me just read this story. So he sent men to capture Samuel. I'm sorry. Word came to Saul. David is in Naioth at Ramah. So he sent men to capture him. But when they saw a group of prophets prophesying with Samuel standing there as a leader, the Spirit of God came upon Saul's men, and they also prophesied. And again, this is some sort of, as far as what exactly they're doing, are they, I don't think they're, and again, this is my opinion, but I don't think they're, expounding the word of the Lord at that point. I think it is kind of a musical, ecstatic sort of, kind of like what we would call speaking in tongues today, something along that line, that there's some sort of emotional, ecstatic, musically based event going on. And so these men from Saul come, okay, we're here to kill David. And again, this is pretty powerful stuff. And I'm not saying the Spirit of God isn't moving, because clearly he is. Okay, that they come in and they say, wow, we got a choice. We can join these guys over here in this musical ecstasy, or we can go kill David. Let's go over here. Off they go. So he sends again. Okay, Saul was told about it, sent men. So he sent men to capture him, but when they saw a group of prophets, Saul was told about it, and he sent more men. Okay, and they prophesied too. Okay, now there's even, twice as many men out there. Saul sent men a 3rd time, and they also prophesied. So Saul clearly gets the idea that, listen, if you want something done right, you got to do it yourself. Okay. Finally, he himself left for Ramah and went to the great cistern at Seku. And he asked, where are Samuel and David? Over in Naioth at Ramah. Side note here, this cistern, this is like a well, a place of watering. It's interesting if you go through the Bible and see, again, maybe my next series will be all the things that happened at wells and fountains, because this is like the watering hole of the day, literally the watering hole of the day, Saul is approaching a watering hole when he says he's looking for Samuel before. Now Saul is approaching a watering hole and he's looking for Samuel again. Remember when he's looking for the donkeys back in chapter 8 or 9. He's looking for the donkeys. They're approaching the watering hole and they ask, 2 girls are coming back from there. Where's Samuel? Here. So here, again, coming a watering hole. So apparently, if you're looking for a prophet, the place to go is your local watering hole. I don't know whether that's true today, because the definition of what a watering hole is today and what a watering hole was then are 2 completely different things. But then again, you may find a prophet in both. I don't know. maybe we'll test that after church today. We'll split up and we'll go to the various watering holes and look for. Could be the water cooler, you know. So they went. So finally, he himself left for Ramah. Okay, he says. So Saul went to Naioth at Ramah, but the Spirit of God came even on him. Okay, so again, the Spirit is really, really moving at this moment. And perhaps you've been in a situation where you just kind of walk into a room and you know, man, something big is going on here. Something seriously, you know, there's a serious movement happening at this point. And it happens periodically where something like that happens. I mean, recently they had I don't know how long it lasted at Asbury Seminary I don't know, where is Asbury Seminary? Kentucky, where there was a revival going on and people were just kind of going there. And there's the great Asbury revival, which kind of launched the Pentecostal movement in 1906 in California. But something similar to that the Spirit of God was moving so powerfully in this group that even Saul, despite all of his predilections and his desire to kill David and the hatred that no doubt he had in his heart at this moment, is overcome by it. So much so, verse 24, he stripped off his garments, and he too prophesied in Samuel's presence. He lay naked all that day and all that night. This is why people say, is Saul also among the prophets? Okay, now, this is not the first time we've heard this question. We heard this question before when Saul last approached a watering hole, met the people coming back after being anointed king, and was prophesying with them. And this is why we know that Saul is particularly sensitive to music, because again, when this previous event happened, people seeing Saul in this group say, is Saul also among the prophets? Now, it's just coincidental, you know, this week as I was reading this, I found this journal article talking about this question about, is Saul among the prophets as well? And this author was making the point that this is the implication here is not a sincere question, okay? That this is kind of an insult or sort of does this guy think he's a prophet? Who does this guy think he is? Is he a prophet? You know, or, you know, or people would talk about Saul. Yeah, Saul thought he was one of them. He even thought he was a prophet. How bad was Saul? He thought he was a prophet. That's how bad Saul was, kind of thing. Okay, that this is what the author wants you to believe, that it's kind of like that, because it's never said of David. Even though they talk about the Spirit of God coming on David, it's never talked about David. Is David among the prophets or not? Okay, maybe David didn't join in, but David was musical too. Okay, David could play the lyre. I don't know that Saul could play an instrument. Saul could certainly sing. Okay, so it's just kind of this point that they're trying to say, well, you know, Saul shouldn't have ever been king. I mean, he shouldn't have ever been a prophet. Thought he was a prophet, thought he was a king. You know, he's terrible prophet, terrible king, kind of thing. So again, it's kind of just pointing out that he's where he doesn't belong. Is kind of the gist that the author is trying. This is the point of this particular article. And I think it does kind of explain why, because it does seem kind of odd. Why Saul among, what does that mean? It's just kind of talking about that the original readers would have understood. Saul is where he doesn't belong, which the bigger picture is at that point in the kingdom, in the kingship, Saul is where he doesn't belong. Saul doesn't belong in the kingship. David does. Okay, so it's just a matter of time before Saul is removed. Is Saul also among the prophets? Any questions up to this point? We good? Okay. Chapter 20, verse 1. Then David fled from Naioth to Ramah and went to Jonathan. Now keep in mind, he's got a day's head start because Saul is lying there naked, in a day's head start. Actually, though, something just occurred to me, and I'm kind of Michael will come back, and one of the things that's going to happen is that David is going to be. I think I'm going to just double back on what I just said about David. There's a scene coming up where David is in a very celebratory mood, and the implication is that he's running around scantily clad. Okay, and I haven't studied through that text yet. And Michael is making fun of him, or it says to him, the only kind of conversation we have between Michael and David, that David is actually doing something fairly similar to what Saul is doing here, and Michael is criticizing him for it, kind of thing. So that's something to look forward to. And then David and Michael have a conversation, and we have the only conversation we have between the two of them, and it's a fairly vicious one, where David really kind of puts her in her place, so to speak. Okay, but be that as it may, so think about that. We'll come back to that idea. One of the things about Samuel is interesting how this stuff keeps coming up, kind of thing. But so David fled from Naioth at Ramah and went to Jonathan and said, "What have I done?" Okay, so it's clear at this point that David knows Saul is out to get him. Okay, if it hadn't clued him in, maybe he thought it was a bad spirit, maybe he thought it was a bad day. Now he realizes, no, you know what? I think at this point David realizes Saul wants me dead. Okay, and so what have I done? He goes to Jonathan because Jonathan is Saul's right-hand man. What have I done? What is my crime? How have I wronged your father that he is trying to kill me? Okay. So David, with a day's head start, seeks out Jonathan. Never, Jonathan replied. You're not going to die. Look, my father doesn't do anything great or small without letting me know. Why would he hide this from me? It isn't so. So it appears that Jonathan seems to not believe David. That no, my dad doesn't want you dead. No. David thinks Saul is hiding something from Jonathan because he says, but David took an oath. Here we are with the oath again. Listen, I am telling you the truth. Okay, what I swear on my father's life or whatever, I swear on my life of whatever, that this is true. Your father knows very well that I have found favor in your eyes. Okay, your dad knows that we have a good thing going here. So he's just not telling you this. You're not as connected as you think you are, is what he's implying. Okay. Has said to himself, Jonathan must know this or he will be grieved, yet as surely as the Lord lives and as you live, there is only a step between me and death. Is he dramatic? Perhaps. But David realizes that, you know what, when the king wants you dead, that's not a good thing, it's because there's a lot of people that are loyal to Saul. Okay, I mean, again, we read the Bible and we think that everybody didn't want Saul as king. That's not true. Okay, there was always a loyal group for Saul, and David's going to meet one later on. But there was always people who thought that Saul was the king. We picked the family. Saul was the king. Jonathan should have been the next king, et cetera, et cetera. And so David took an oath. So there's only a step. Jonathan says to David, okay, whatever you want me to do, I'll do for you. Jonathan said, listen, I will help you in any way I can. Now here David has a plan. Okay, so Jonathan agrees to help and David has a plan. Now his plan is this, like tomorrow is the new moon feast. And this was an agricultural feast that was fairly typical. It took over multiple days. And I am supposed to dine with the king, but let me go and hide in the field until the evening of the day after tomorrow. If your father misses me at all, okay, if your father notices I'm gone, tell him, David earnestly asked my permission to hurry to Bethlehem, his hometown. Okay, David, city of David, Bethlehem, his hometown, because an annual sacrifice is being made there for his whole clan. If he says, very well, then your servant is safe. But if he loses his temper, you can be sure that he is determined to harm me. Okay. As for you, well, hold on a second. So David's got this plan. Okay. So there's this multiple day ceremony, or there's multiple day festival. And if your father notices me missing, or when your father notices me missing, how he reacts is going to tell you what he wants. If you've ever seen Hamlet, has anybody seen Hamlet, the Shakespeare play Hamlet? There's, if you ever see Hamlet, you should. If you haven't, you should. Okay, but it's one of those things where you have like Shakespeare's greatest hits. There's all these quotations going. I've heard that. I've heard that. I've heard that. I've heard that. Kind of thing. But the line, the play's the thing wherein we catch the conscience of the king. So Hamlet knows that has been told by a ghost that his uncle has killed his father. And so his great idea at this point in the play is that he is going to there's going to be a play within a play, with the player king and all of that a play within the play is going to be put on, somewhat touching on the death of my father. It's kind of, I've only seen it like 31 times. But so this play is going to reenact the scene, the events of the death of Hamlet's father, and he tells Horatio, his partner in crime, watch the king, and how the king reacts will tell you whether the king is guilty or not. So they do the play, and of course the king reacts. He stands up, give me some light, the play ends, etc., and everybody knows Hamlet goes off, kills Polonius by mistake, sent to England, comes back, blah, 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 everybody dies. I'm sorry, I think I just gave away the whole plot of Hamlet right there. But yeah, that's about it. Well, not everybody dies. Horatio doesn't die. Everybody else dies, or was already dead to begin with. But that's the same thing. It's like, okay, we're gonna stage this event, and you're gonna watch the king, and how the king reacts is what is going to tell you something about what happens. And so he does. So that's what happens. But before then, David is like, look, he's not 100% certain that Jonathan is not in the know about what David. And so he says here at the end, as for you, show kindness to your servant, for you have brought him into a covenant with you before the Lord. If I am guilty, then kill me yourself. Why hand me over to your father? And I think here's like, if there's something you're not telling me, then just kill me now. Just do it. Just get it over with. Okay. Now he says this knowing that he's been anointed king, and Jonathan hasn't. But you just, kill me now. So Jonathan said, if I had the least inkling that my father was determined to harm you, wouldn't I tell you? Okay, so again, this is kind of the point of what David is saying. Like, would you? Kind of thing. David asked him, who will tell me if your father answers harshly? So who is going to tell me? How are we going to find this out? Then Jonathan said to David, I swear by the Lord, the God of Israel, that I will surely sound on my father by this time the day after tomorrow. If he is favorably disposed toward you, will I not send you word and let you know? But if my father intends to harm you, may the Lord deal with Jonathan, be it ever so severely, which is almost exactly the construction that Saul uses when he says Jonathan needs to die for eating the honey. May the Lord deal with me ever so severely if Jonathan doesn't die. That's Samuel 14. If I do not let you know and send you away in peace, may the Lord be with you as he had been with my father. Now, Jonathan reminds David of something, and he says, but, where am I here? Who will tell me? But, verse 13, if my father intends, may the Lord, verse 14, but show me unfailing kindness like the Lord's kindness. This unfailing kindness, this is the Hebrew word hesed, which is kind of the loving kindness relationship that we want in society, that as believers we should have this sort of relationship, this relationship of hesed. It's what God has for us, that we're supposed to recreate this Hesed relationship, and to Jonathan, that is the relationship between that is like a fully transparent. I am for you, you are for me. I will do whatever I can to support you. This is Jonathan, who is on paper the next king, is saying to the king that God has said is going to be the next king. I mean, when Jonathan is talking to David, he is looking at the guy who is going to replace him, who is going to be taking his position. I think at this point, Jonathan realizes maybe it's here, Jonathan realizes that he will never be king. Okay, which, for some people doesn't go over very well. When you've been raised your whole life being told you're going to be the next king, which I have every reason to believe that's what Jonathan was, to realize this is never going to happen for me. And this is why Jonathan is like the greatest guy in the Old Testament. I'm like, he just says, okay. And he says, but show me unfailing kindness like the Lord's kindness as long as I live, so that I may not be killed, and do not ever cut off your kindness from my family, not even when the Lord has cut off every one of David's enemies from the face of the earth. Okay, so at this point, Saul has made it very clear that David is his enemy, which stands to reason, makes Saul David's enemy. So when Jonathan says this, he's like, he's admitting that my family, larger family, Saul's family is not going to make it out of this alive. Okay? And he's like, you know what? Protect my family. Okay? And David says yes. Well, he's already said yes. He's just reminding him of this relationship. And this will come back, and we all know, we've all heard, Mephibosheth, we know this story, that at some point, and I think I've got the text there, in 2 Samuel 9:3, David reminds Jonathan of their covenant. And in 2 Samuel 9:3, we have where David is the king, he's fully secured, and he asks, are there any descendants of Jonathan that I can show them kindness? And this is where he finds out about Mephibosheth and all of that. Okay. And even later, much later on, Mephibosheth is involved in something, and there's reason to believe that Mephibosheth is involved in a plot to overthrow David. It's not clear whether he is or not. And even at that point, David still doesn't take action against Mephibosheth because he's Jonathan's descendant. He's Jonathan's grandson. So David fulfills this. Okay. But I'm just thinking this is the amazing thing to me about this is Jonathan. I mean, this guy knows he's not getting out of this alive. He knows he's not getting what he's been told his entire life, and he accepts that. I think about how we live in our life, that we always want a backup and a safety net and a plan B, and we'll do this because we're going to succeed kind of thing. It's like no, the Bible never says, and the New Testament never teaches that believers are going to be popular. That the believers are going to be that if what did Jesus say? If they hate you, they hated me first. And so we go through life in this very transactional way. Say, okay, I'm going to do this because this is what's going to happen to me. I'm going to abase myself. I'm going to become least because the Bible says if I want to be the best, I have to be the least. So I'm going to be the least. I'm going to walk in the least and expect to get promoted here. And if I don't get promoted, I'm going to get all very mad about things. I mean, Jonathan had every reason to believe this was all going to be his someday. Who knows? Maybe Saul looked out over the kingdom and said, this will all be yours someday. And Jonathan realizes that none of this is going to be mine through no action of his. Okay? I mean, Jonathan does nothing but good in Samuel. Okay, so I'm like, to me, it's like Jonathan is and Michael to a certain extent. We don't know whether Jonathan has any idols in his house, but Jonathan is like the tragic figure of Samuel, not Saul. Saul had a chance. Jonathan never had a chance, and yet he's like trusting the Lord, fighting for the Lord, recognizing that David is going to become the next king, and saying, okay, sorry, I'll get off. It's just Jonathan. I get excited about Jonathan. So Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, may the Lord call David's enemies to account. And Jonathan had David reaffirm his oath out of love for him, because he loved him as he loved himself, which is going back to what was said in 1 Samuel 18. Okay, so, the bottom line to this one is be Jonathan. Jonathan is the guy. If you're going to look at somebody in the Old Testament and say, I want to be like that guy, be Jonathan, not David. I mean, David's great. I get it. But be Jonathan. Jonathan is the guy. Okay. So then he goes on. It's 10:01. He goes on and tells the story, beginning in verse 18. Tomorrow is the new moon feast. You will be missed because your seat will be empty. The day after tomorrow, toward evening, go to the place where you hid when this trouble began and wait by the stone Ezo. I will shoot 3 arrows to the side of it, as though I was shooting at a target. Then I will send a boy and say, go find the arrows. If I say to him, look, the arrows are on this side of you, bring them here. Then come. So Jonathan is here. He's going to shoot the arrows that way. And David is overhearing this. And if I tell the boy to come, David is to come. If I tell the boy to go, David is to go. But if I say to the boy, look, the arrows are beyond you, then you must go, because the Lord has sent you away. And about the matter you and I discussed, remember, the Lord is witness between you and me forever. Jonathan is trusting the Lord to keep this. So David hid in the field, and when the new moon feast came, the king sat down to eat. He sat in his customary place opposite Jonathan, and Abner sat next to Saul, but David's place was empty, obviously. Saul said nothing that day, for he thought something must have happened to David to make him ceremonially unclean. Surely he's unclean. This was a kind of ceremony where you had to be ceremonially clean. Things like touching a dead body, having a cold, all kinds of things would make you ceremonially unclean. So it was not unusual or not noticeable to miss the first day. The point here, to me, is thinking about Saul. Saul is perfectly rational here. He understands, like if Saul was nuts, he would have gone ballistic then. So Saul sees David as a threat. Now, again, he's got these harmful spirits, but he recognizes David as a threat. And he's absolutely right. David is a threat. David is the guy that is going to take over the throne. So he says, but the next day, the second day of the month, David's place was empty again. Then Saul said to his son Jonathan, because Jonathan and he knows, why hasn't the son of Jesse come to the meal either yesterday or today? Okay. Now, when he says the son of David, son of Jesse, this is an insult. Okay. This is an insult. He says, reminds him of the covenant. Ultimately, Saul notices that the son of Jesse, an insult, is absent. Okay. Again, he doesn't say his name now. He won't even say his name, the son of Jesse. There's a point in Hamlet where Hamlet reappears, and Claudius, who is threatened by Hamlet, looks to Gertrude, his mother, and says, won't say his name, just take care of your son, kind of thing, sort of thing. So it's like, but it's interesting, in Matthew 13, Jesus has done a series of teaching, and there's reaction of the crowd. And the crowd says, isn't this the son of Joseph? And we read it today and we think, oh, they're just talking about the family name, but it's not. It's an insult. It's an insult to just refer to him by, oh, you're the son of so-and-so. You're just the son of so-and-so. You're not an individual in your own right. So Jonathan gives him the answer. David earnestly asked me for permission, et cetera, et cetera. Would have kind of skipped through here. Of course, the point is, theoretically, the argument can be made that if David wanted to be excused from this, he should have asked Saul, not Jonathan. But Saul's anger flared up at Jonathan, and he said to them, you son of a perverse and rebellious woman. This is how you deal with an argument. You insult the guy's mother. Okay? You son of a perverse and rebellious woman. Now, as far as we know, Saul only had the one wife. Okay? which were 7 fewer than David ended up having, just saying, but had just the one wife. You son of a perverse. So he insults Jonathan's mother. Don't I know that you have sided with the son of Jesse to your own shame and to the shame of the mother who bore you? As long as the son of Jesse lives on this earth, neither you nor your kingdom will be established. Saul's like, don't you get it? Don't you understand what's going on? And the thing is, Jonathan does. Jonathan understands it better than Saul does. Okay? I think Saul just sees a political coup attempt. Jonathan, I think, sees the hand of the Lord moving here. Okay? As long as the son, now send someone to bring him to me, for he must die. Jonathan replies, why should he be put to death? What has he done? Jonathan asks his father. But Saul hurled his spear at him to kill him. Then Jonathan knew that his father intended to kill David. So it took Saul trying to kill Jonathan before Jonathan realized he really does want David dead. I don't know what Jonathan was thinking. Again, he's his father, grown up with him. Maybe he's thinking, no, I can talk him out of it, etc., etc. Jonathan got up from the table in fierce anger. On that second day of the feast, he did not eat because he was grieved at his father's shameful treatment of David. I think David, or I think Jonathan is willing to say, you know what, Saul is going to live out his kingdom, and he's going to die, and David is going to become the king or something. I don't know how he figured it was going to go. In the morning, Jonathan went out to the field for this meeting with David. He had a small boy with him, and he said to the boy, run and find the arrows I shoot. As the boy ran, he shot an arrow beyond him. When the boy came to the place where Jonathan's arrow had fallen, Jonathan called out after him, isn't the arrow beyond you? So he's saying, go. Then he says, hurry, go quickly, don't stop. Is he talking to the boy? Or is he talking to David? He's talking to David. Okay, he knows David is out there. He said, don't stop. The boy picked up the arrow and returned to his master. The boy knew nothing about all of this. Only Jonathan and David knew what was going on. Then Jonathan gave his weapons to the boy and said, go, carry them back to town. After the boy had gone, David got up from the south side of the stone. That's interesting. Jonathan is unarmed. Okay, David already has his sword. He already has his armor. He's there with a bow and arrow. He gives it to the boy. So it's nice. Jonathan is completely unarmed. Going to go stand next to the guy who's going to replace him. Okay, so if David was just a political usurper, Jonathan's dead at this moment. Completely unarmed. David comes out, says, after the boy, Jonathan, and bowed down before Jonathan 3 times. It's the only time in the Bible we have an indication of somebody bowing down 3 times. Jonathan bows down 3 times, or David bows down 3 times before Jonathan. Okay, it's like, why are you, David realizes, I think David just realizes that Jonathan is the greatest of all time here. That he's the guy that's giving it up and knows it and is willing to submit to this plan, which has no good end for him. And Jonathan is going to end up dying in battle, defending the king he knows is doomed. Okay. After the boy had gone, David got up, bowed down 3 times with his face to the ground. Then they kissed each other and wept together, but David wept the most. There's one of the last lines in Hamlet is that Hamlet is apologizing to Laertes, and he says something along the line of, I'm sorry that I shot my arrow over your house and hurt my friend. Something like that. But that wasn't his intention. But David realizes that my success means his, I don't want to say failure, but he's going to be removed for me to succeed, kind of thing. Okay. Then they kissed each other, but David wept the most. Jonathan said to David, go in peace, for we have sworn friendship with each other in the name of the Lord, saying, the Lord is witness between you and me, and between your descendants and my descendants. Jonathan, even at the end here, is thinking about his family. He's thinking about others. He's not thinking about himself. Because he knows that the normal rule of thumb, when you have a regime change, you get rid of all of the family members, sons, uncles, cousins of the other guy. He knows that's the normal thing in that time period, in that era. Okay. And he's trusting David to protect his family. And I think Jonathan knows he's not going to get out of this thing alive, kind of thing. Then David left, and Jonathan went back to the town. Okay. It doesn't get much better. You know, the next chapter, we're going to go, David is going to go to the temple. But we'll talk about that next week. Any questions? I know we're getting 10, 11. Still got time. Any questions?
Is it too much reading into the text as a New Testament believer to think of Jonathan? I mean, we don't hear all the details of his story because it doesn't drive the overall story of Jesus, but still, his example of faith and faithfulness, you know, in the battle he fought with just his servant and his loyalty to David, you know, it seems like he's got something special that the Bible doesn't dwell on between him and the Lord, which I think, is it too much to say, is such an influence on David, because I want to say the Bible deals on David's faith and his outpouring of emotion in the Psalms and that, where it seems as Jonathan is very similar, but we don't get the details.
So is it asking too much as a New Testament believer to see Jonathan as? I don't think it's too much to. So the question is it too much to look into the life of Jonathan and draw faith lessons from it?
I haven't thought that much about it until the class.
Yeah. Well, I don't think so, and I haven't either. I haven't either. As I go through the text and look at it, because again, I mean, we know. What do you know about David? Well, let's see. We know Goliath. We know Saul tried to kill him. We know Bathsheba. We know Psalms. Who is Jonathan? Jonathan was Saul's son. It's like, well, all of these people were part of the story and part of what made David who he is, and I think Jonathan is a great example for a New Testament believer. I mean, again, to me, he's the tragic figure, or he's the exemplar in Samuel. That if you're going to look for somebody in Samuel and say, wow, that's somebody I really want to, and I think a really good lesson, or not lesson so much, but a series or something could be done just on the life of Jonathan. That's my opinion.
I can't imagine David not yearning for a faithful friend later in life, or using that relationship to inform his life or his spiritual relationship with God.
Well, one wonders if had Jonathan lived, what kind of a king David would have been with a friend like that, or if he had a friend like that, what kind of king David would have been. It's an interesting question. But so, all right. Well, thank you very much. See you all next week.